the forgotten sin. The storm hit the Montana wilderness like the fist of an angry god, rattling the windows of Captain Marcus Steele's isolated cabin. At 62, Marcus had grown accustomed to solitude. It was penance for sins that still haunted his dreams. The howling wind carried memories he'd spent 28 years trying to bury. Thunder crashed overhead as Marcus stoked the dying embers in his fireplace, his weathered hands trembling slightly, not from cold, but from the ghost of a decision that had cost him everything. He could still see her face, Zira, the alien child he'd pulled from that sterile laboratory hell, barely 10 years old by human standards, with luminescent silver skin and eyes like captured starlight. She had been Project Nightfall's most prized specimen. The military brass called it xenobiological research. Marcus called it torture. He remembered the night he'd made his choice, 28 years ago at the Nevada facility. Dr. Edmund Voss had been preparing for another round of tissue compatibility tests, a euphemism for procedures that made hardened soldiers vomit. Marcus was supposed to stand guard to watch as they cut into that small, terrified being who had done nothing but crash land on Earth. Instead, he'd drawn his sidearm on his own commanding officer. "Stand down, Steele!" Colonel James Reeves had shouted, but Marcus was already moving. He'd triggered the facility's fire suppression system, plunging the lab into chaos. In the confusion, he'd snatched Zira from her containment unit and made a run for the service tunnels he'd memorized during weeks of planning. The escape had been a nightmare of alarms and gunfire. Marcus had faked Zira's death using pig's blood and thermite charges, then smuggled her unconscious form to a contact in the underground, Thomas Briggs, a disillusioned scientist who helped them reach a hidden launch facility in Oregon. The last time Marcus saw Zira, she was climbing into a modified atmospheric shuttle, her large eyes filled with trust and something that might have been love. He'd watched her disappear into the stars, knowing he'd never see her again. The court-martial had been swift and merciless. Stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, labeled a traitor to his own species. Marcus had retreated to these mountains, living off his military pension and the occasional hunting guide job, trying to convince himself the sacrifice had been worth it. A brilliant flash of light suddenly illuminated the cabin, followed by a sound that wasn't quite thunder. Marcus pressed his face to the window, squinting through the rain. Something was falling from the sky, something metallic and wrong, trailing fire and smoke as it crashed into the forest half a mile from his cabin. His blood turned to ice. He'd seen objects like that before in classified briefings about unidentified aerial phenomena. But this wasn't a weather balloon or experimental aircraft. This was a ship. Marcus grabbed his rifle and rain gear, knowing his quiet exile was about to end. As he stepped into the storm, one thought echoed through his mind. After 28 years of silence, the past had finally come looking for him. The forest was alive with electricity and the smell of ozone as Marcus made his way toward the crash site. Whatever was in that ship, he had a feeling his greatest trial was just beginning. Blood of Two Worlds. Marcus approached the wreckage through sheets of rain, his rifle held ready. The ship, if it could be called that, was unlike anything in Earth's arsenal. Its hull rippled with an oily iridescence, as if forged from liquid starlight. Steam hissed where the superheated metal met the cold mountain air. A section of the craft suddenly dilated like an iris, and Marcus raised his weapon. What emerged made his heart stop. She was tall now, nearly 6 feet, with the same luminescent silver skin he remembered but stretched over a warrior's frame. Her hair had darkened to deep violet, flowing like liquid shadow around sharp, elegant features that were unmistakably alien yet hauntingly familiar. When she turned those starlight eyes toward him, Marcus felt 28 years collapse into nothing. "Hello, Marcus," Zira said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his chest. I told you I would find a way to repay my debt. The rifle slipped from Marcus's numb fingers. Zira, but how is this possible? She stepped closer, and he could see the subtle changes the years had wrought. Her movements held predatory grace, and when she smiled, he glimpsed teeth that were too sharp, too perfect. Yet underneath the alien transformation, he still recognized the frightened child he'd saved. Time moves differently among my people, she explained, rain beating like mercury on her skin. But that's not why I've returned. Her expression darkened. Marcus, do you remember the experiments they performed on me? The memories crashed back. Sterile rooms, Dr. Voss's clinical detachment, Zira's silent screams. The tissue compatibility tests, he whispered. They weren't just testing compatibility, Zira said, her voice heavy with revelation. They were creating it. Dr. Voss used your genetic material, Marcus, your blood, your DNA. They bonded it with mine during the neural interface procedures. Marcus staggered backward, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm saying that when you saved me, you gave me more than freedom. Tears that sparkled like crushed diamonds ran down her cheeks. You gave me life, literally. The hybrid process. It made you my father, in every way that matters. The world tilted around Marcus. He thought of all the sleepless nights wondering if Zira had survived, never knowing that a part of him had gone with her to the stars. Why didn't you tell me before you left? I didn't know. The knowledge came later as my hybrid nature fully manifested. Zira's hands clenched into fists. But Marcus, that's not the worst of it. Humanity's deep space mining operations have awakened something terrible, the Vorthak Empire. They've been dormant for millennia, but your species disturbed their sacred burial worlds. Marcus felt ice form in his veins. Burial worlds. The asteroid fields you've been harvesting for rare minerals. They're graveyards, Marcus. The resting places of billions of Vorthak ancestors. Your people have been desecrating the dead for decades, and now the Empire has awakened to reclaim what was stolen. Thunder crashed overhead, as if punctuating her words. How long do we have? Their advance fleet will reach Earth in 72 hours, Zira said. But there's hope. My hybrid nature, the combination of human and my species' genetics, it creates a resonance the Vorthak can't ignore. I'm the only one who can speak to them as an equal, convince them that not all humans deserve extinction. Marcus's mind raced. That's why you came back. Not just to warn us, but to save my father's world, Zira finished. But Marcus, there's something else. Project Nightfall never ended. They've been waiting for me to return, tracking my people's technology. Even now, General Victoria Cross is mobilizing her teams. She wants to finish what Dr. Voss started. As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of helicopters began to cut through the storm. Marcus grabbed Zira's hand. Her skin was fever-warm and sparked with subtle energy. Then we run, he said, like we should have 28 years ago. Zira squeezed his hand, and for a moment, she was that frightened child again. Together? Together, Marcus promised, as searchlights began to sweep the forest around them. Hunters in the dark General Victoria Cross pressed her finger to her earpiece as the helicopter banked toward the crash site. Through night vision goggles, she watched heat signatures moving through the forest below, two figures fleeing eastward, toward the mountain ridge. Target acquired, she reported, her voice crisp with decades of military precision. The asset has returned. Cross had been a young lieutenant 28 years ago when Captain Marcus Steele destroyed her career's greatest triumph. She'd worked alongside Dr. Voss to perfect the hybridization process, watching their alien subject develop capabilities that could revolutionize human evolution. Then Steele had torn it all away in one night of misguided heroics. But Cross had learned patience, She'd rebuilt Project Nightfall in the shadows, using black-budget funding to track alien incursions worldwide. Every unexplained phenomenon, every UFO sighting, every whisper of extraterrestrial contact had crossed her desk. She'd been waiting for this moment, when their escaped specimen would inevitably return home. Deploy Strike Team Alpha at grid. Reference 774, she ordered. Use non-lethal force on the asset. Steel is expendable. Below in the forest, Marcus and Zira moved like shadows through the underbrush. Zira's hybrid senses were fully active now, her eyes glowing with soft bioluminescence as she navigated the treacherous terrain. "They're hurting us," she whispered, pausing behind a massive pine tree. 3 teams forming a perimeter, pushing us toward the eastern cliff. Marcus checked his rifle, muscle memory from decades past taking over. "You said you have abilities. Now, can you—" "Not without revealing our position to every sensor array within 50 miles, Zira interrupted. "My people's technology creates unique electromagnetic signatures. Cross knows exactly what to look for." A branch snapped somewhere behind them. Marcus cursed under his breath. They were running out of time and options. "There's an old mining tunnel system about 2 clicks north. If we can reach it," Zira suddenly stiffened, her head tilting as if listening to something beyond human perception. Her expression shifted from concern to horror. "Marcus, they're not just here for me," she breathed. "I'm detecting Vorthak energy signatures. They're scouts. They're already on Earth." As if responding to her words, the forest around them began to change. The air grew thick and humid, carrying scents of ozone and something organic yet alien. Trees creaked and groaned as if under immense pressure, their leaves rustling without wind. A low, thrumming sound resonated through the ground, not quite mechanical, not quite organic. It was the sound of something vast and ancient stirring to life. "What is that?" Marcus whispered. Before Zira could answer, the first scout emerged from behind a cluster of boulders. It stood 7 feet tall, its form a nightmarish fusion of insect and machine. Chitinous armor plates shifted over mechanical joints, while compound eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence. Razor-sharp appendages extended from its arms, dripping with some kind of corrosive fluid that hissed when it hit the ground. "Vorthak harvester," Zira said, her voice tight with fear. "They're collecting genetic samples, preparing for the main invasion." The creature's head swiveled toward them with mechanical precision. A sound like grinding metal emerged from its throat, some kind of communication signal. Almost immediately, answering calls echoed through the forest from at least a dozen different directions. "We're trapped," Marcus realized. Cross's teams on one side, alien scouts on the other. Zira's form began to shimmer, energy patterns dancing across her skin. Not trapped, motivated. Her voice carried new harmonics, deeper and more complex than before. "Marcus, I need you to trust me completely. What I'm about to do will make us visible to every sensor on the continent. But it's our only chance." "Do it," Marcus said, without hesitation. Zira closed her eyes and extended her hands. The air around her began to warp and twist, reality bending like heated glass. Energy cascaded from her body in waves of silver light, and Marcus felt his hair stand on end as the very atoms around them vibrated with power. The Vorthak scout closest to them suddenly froze, its compound eyes flickering as if receiving conflicting signals. Then, impossibly, it turned and began attacking its companions, its razor appendages slicing through chitinous armor like paper. "Hybrid override protocol," Zira explained through gritted teeth, sweat beading on her luminescent skin. "I can temporarily reprogram their neural networks, but only for a few minutes." Explosions echoed through the forest as the controlled scout detonated the other's power cores. Cross's voice could be heard shouting orders over radio static, her carefully laid trap dissolving into chaos. "Now we run!" Zira gasped. the energy field around her flickering and dying. "That display just announced our presence to every interested party within 1,000 miles. We have maybe 20 minutes before this place becomes a war zone." Marcus grabbed her arm as she swayed with exhaustion. "The mining tunnels. We can disappear underground until what?" Zira looked at him with eyes full of desperate love and terrible knowledge. "Marcus, there are hundreds more scouts already planet-side. The main fleet will arrive tomorrow, and when it does, they'll turn every major population center into glass. Unless I can reach their command ship and convince them to listen, your entire species will be extinct within 72 hours. As they ran toward the mountain tunnels, with the sounds of alien technology and human warfare erupting behind them, Marcus realized the scope of what they faced. This wasn't just about saving themselves anymore. It was about saving two worlds and the fragile bridge his daughter represented between them. The price of war, the abandoned mining tunnel, had seemed like salvation until the tranquilizer dart found its mark in Marcus's neck. He collapsed beside Zira, who was already unconscious from the specialized neural disruptor, designed specifically for her hybrid physiology. General Cross emerged from the shadows, flanked by soldiers in advanced tactical gear. 28 years, Steele, Cross said, her voice echoing in the narrow tunnel. 28 years I've waited to finish what you interrupted. Marcus fought against the sedative coursing through his veins, watching helplessly as Cross's team secured Zira with electromagnetic restraints. "She's not your enemy," he slurred. "She's trying to save us all." "Save us?" Cross laughed bitterly. "She's the key to controlling them, Steele. Do you have any idea what we've accomplished since you destroyed our work?" 12 hours later, Marcus awakened in a sterile holding cell deep within Project Nightfall's new facility, a massive underground complex built into the Colorado mountains. Through reinforced glass, he could see into the main laboratory where his worst nightmares had been made real. Dr. Voss, now elderly but still coldly efficient, supervised a team of technicians working on dozens of containment units. Each one held a child, human in appearance but with subtle alien characteristics. Silver-tinged skin, oversized eyes, elongated limbs. They floated in synthetic amniotic fluid, their small faces peaceful in artificial sleep. Beautiful, aren't they? Cross appeared beside his cell, her expression one of twisted pride. "Generation 2 hybrids. We've been perfecting the process using genetic material recovered from your original escape route. Your blood samples, Steele. Your DNA bonding with various alien specimens we've acquired over the decades." Marcus's hands pressed against the glass, horror washing over him. "They're children. They're innocent. They're weapons," Cross corrected. "Each one designed for a specific purpose: enhanced strength, telepathic abilities, electromagnetic manipulation. When the aliens come, and we always knew they would, humanity will be ready." "Where is Zira?" Cross gestured toward the far end of the laboratory, where a separate chamber glowed with intense blue light. Through the energy field, Marcus could see Zira suspended in a complex apparatus, neural interfaces piercing her skull while machines extracted something from her body. "Your daughter is providing us with the final component we need," Cross explained. "Her unique hybrid matrix, the original fusion of human and alien genetics. We're downloading her neural patterns, her genetic memories, everything that makes her the perfect bridge between species." Dr. Voss approached, his aged face creased with scientific fascination. "The process is remarkable, General. Her hybrid consciousness contains communication protocols for 17 different alien species, including these Vorthak. Once we've extracted and replicated her abilities, we can mass-produce hybrid soldiers with full diplomatic immunity to alien aggression." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, fighting against his restraints. "She came here to help you, to prevent a war." "There was never going to be peace, Steele," Cross said. "Only conquest, or surrender. I choose conquest. A low alarm began to sound throughout the facility. Red lights flashed as technicians scrambled to their stations. On the main display screen, satellite imagery showed massive shapes descending. Through Earth's atmosphere, the Vorthak fleet had arrived early. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures over major population centers. The alien fleet is deploying some kind of atmospheric processors." Cross cursed under her breath. "How long until the extraction is complete?" "Another 4 hours minimum," Dr. Voss replied. "The hybrid's neural complexity is beyond our initial projections." Through the laboratory's viewing ports, Marcus could see explosions lighting up the night sky. The war had begun, and humanity was losing. But something else caught his attention: movement in the hybrid containment units. The children were awakening. The electromagnetic fields around their chambers flickered as some kind of resonance effect spread through the facility. The children's eyes opened simultaneously, glowing with the same starlight luminescence as Zira's. They were responding to their sister's distress. "Dr. Voss," a technician called out urgently, "we're losing containment on the Generation 2 subjects. Their neural activity is spiking beyond safe parameters." "Impossible," Voss snapped, but Marcus could see the truth on the monitors. The hybrid children weren't just awakening, they were synchronizing, their minds linking through some kind of genetic telepathy. In her extraction chamber, Zira's eyes suddenly opened, meeting Marcus's gaze across the laboratory. Even through the neural interfaces and energy fields, he could see her message clearly: "Get ready to run." The first containment unit shattered as a hybrid boy, no more than 8 years old, generated an electromagnetic pulse that shorted out his restraints. Then another, and another, until alarms were shrieking throughout the facility. "All units, contain the subjects," Cross shouted, but it was too late. The hybrid children moved with inhuman coordination, their combined abilities overwhelming the laboratory's security systems. As chaos erupted around them, Marcus realized this was their chance, perhaps their only chance, to escape. But even if they could get out, the real question remained. With Vorthak warships turning Earth's cities to ash, would there be a world left to save? The battle for humanity's future had begun, and the price of victory might be higher than anyone had imagined. Legacy of the Guardian. The hybrid children moved like a single organism, their combined consciousness overwhelming Project Nightfall's defenses. 8-year-old Kai phased through solid walls while his sister Nova generated electromagnetic shields that deflected gunfire. Another child, Orion, manipulated gravity itself, sending armored soldiers floating helplessly toward the ceiling. Marcus watched in amazement as Zira's extraction chamber began to crack under the psychic pressure. The neural interfaces sparked and withdrew from her skull as the children's linked minds severed the connections holding her captive. "The facility is compromised," Dr. Voss shouted, his life's work crumbling around him. "We need to evacuate the primary samples." "No!" Cross drew her sidearm, her face twisted with decades of obsession. "I won't lose her again. Kill them all if necessary." But the hybrid children had surrounded Cross's soldiers, their eyes blazing with protective fury. They were no longer test subjects. They were a family defending itself. Zira emerged from her shattered prison, weakened, but alive. Energy still crackled around her as she stumbled toward Marcus's cell. With a gesture, the reinforced glass turned to powder. "The children," she gasped, falling into his arms. "Marcus, they're all connected to me. They're my siblings, genetically speaking. Your children, too." Marcus looked at the dozen hybrid children who had gathered around them, each one bearing traces of his DNA combined with different alien species. They were his legacy, twisted by Cross's ambitions but still family. "Can you reach the Vorthak fleet?" he asked urgently. Outside, the sounds of orbital bombardment grew closer. "Not from here," Zira replied. "The facility's shielding blocks long range. Communication. But Marcus, even if I could reach Emperor Kethmore, why would he listen? Humanity has been desecrating Vorthak burial worlds for decades. The evidence of these experiments only proves how barbaric your species can be. An explosion rocked the facility as Vorthak ground forces breached the outer perimeter. Through security monitors, Marcus could see the towering forms of Vorthak warriors, beings of crystalline armor and pure energy who wielded weapons that could unmake matter itself. Because, Marcus said, making a decision that felt inevitable, someone has to prove that not all humans are monsters. He turned to address the hybrid children, these impossible offspring of two worlds. Listen to me. I know you're scared and you have every right to be, but you're not weapons. You never were. You're bridges, connections between species that could prevent this war from consuming everything. Little Nova stepped forward, her silver eyes wise beyond her years. What do you need us to do? Marcus's plan was desperate, but it was all they had. The hybrid children would use their combined abilities to create a telepathic beacon, amplifying Zira's signal to reach the Vorthak command ship. But the process would require an enormous amount of power, more than the facility's generators could provide. The nuclear reactor, Marcus realized. If we overload it, channel that energy through the hybrid network, the facility will be destroyed, Zira finished. And anyone still inside. But the signal will reach Kethmore, Marcus said. And maybe, just maybe, he'll see that humans are capable of sacrifice as well as cruelty. Cross appeared at the laboratory. Entrance, her remaining soldiers forming a desperate last stand. I won't let you destroy 28 years of progress. The firefight was brief, but intense. Cross's advanced weapons were no match for the hybrid children's combined abilities, but in the chaos, a stray shot found its mark. Marcus felt the bullet tear through his chest, his strength bleeding away onto the laboratory floor. Dad! Zira caught him as he fell, the word carrying all the love and loss of their impossible relationship. Get to the reactor, Marcus whispered, pressing something into her hand. The detonation codes he'd memorized from his military days. End this. Save both our worlds. As Zira and the children raced toward the facility's power core, Marcus faced Cross one final time. The general stood over him, her weapon trained on his heart. You destroyed everything, she hissed. Humanity's greatest chance for survival. No, Marcus said, thinking of Zira and the hybrid children, of the possibility for peace between species. I gave it hope. The facility shook as Zira reached the reactor core. Through their genetic bond, Marcus felt her link with the hybrid children, their combined consciousness reaching out across space toward the Vorthak fleet. The signal was pure, not words, but emotions, love, sacrifice, the willingness to die, for others rather than kill them. Emperor Kethmore received the transmission aboard his flagship as his forces prepared to glass another human city. For the first time in millennia, the ancient ruler paused. The hybrid signal carried something he had not expected from this violent species, genuine remorse and the sacrifice of life to prove it. In the facility's dying moments, as nuclear, fire-consumed Project Nightfall, Cross saw the truth in Marcus's eyes. He had won. Even in death, his legacy would live on in the bridges he had helped create between worlds. The explosion lit up the Colorado mountains like a second sun. When the light faded, Kethmore ordered his fleet to cease fire. The hybrid signal had convinced him that perhaps these humans were capable of evolution after all. Zira and the hybrid children emerged from the wreckage, protected by their combined abilities. They were no longer prisoners or weapons. They were the guardians of a new age. Marcus Steele was gone, but his greatest mission had succeeded. In the years that followed, as humanity and the Vorthak Empire negotiated their first tentative peace, children born of two worlds would serve as ambassadors and protectors. They carried Marcus's legacy in their DNA and his compassion in their hearts. The Guardian's watch had ended, but his true family would ensure that the bridge between worlds remained strong. Love, it turned out, was the most powerful weapon of all.